It was the Friday before Memorial Day weekend at Oak Street Market, and cashier Stacy Larson had endured enough drama for 2 careers. She hadn't been able to open the self-checkouts until 20 minutes into her shift because a construction crew was assembling a maze-like structure that was supposed to make the lines more organized, with signs directing the clientele to the 30 items or fewer lanes and the registers for larger orders. This edifice hadn't been up for more than an hour when manager Gerald Whitney sprinted to the self-checkouts like he was pursuing a shoplifter with marathon credentials, shot a glare of flabbergasted rage at the structure, and bellowed loudly enough to be heard in Sun Prairie, "You've sabotaged my universe!" Stacy and her coworkers found out a week later that Gerald's son, assistant manager Carl, who believed that since he would be running the store after his father retired in 6 months, his right to ordering improvements was just as valid as his dad's, had bought the structure behind Gerald's back. When Carl all too conveniently refused to exit the dairy cooler, where he was performing inventory duties that couldn't be postponed until after he'd helped his dad tear down the offending walls, Gerald stomped into the back room with the attitude of a 5-year-old in a 65-year-old's body. He returned 5 minutes later astride a forklift and furiously plowed into the structure as customers and employees fled into the surrounding aisles with the frantic velocity of blowing snow. As Stacy ducked behind her workstation to avoid being knocked out by the 50-pound slab of drywall spiraling towards her head, both she and her manager simultaneously remembered with equal horror that he had never been properly schooled in the forklift's operation. After crashing through a gigantic display of 35 packs of bottled water, causing a deluge that necessitated the frantic unplugging of all 10 self-checkouts, the forklift continued on its uninhibited path towards the back doors as Gerald yelled, "Doesn't anyone know how to turn off this damn thing?" forgetting in his panic that only third-shift employees were trained to use the forklift for something besides a WMD, and it was 10:30 in the morning. As the forklift rampaged through the parking lot, a car caddy operator dropped an expletive he thought he'd never utter while clocked in, and hastily ducked behind a trash barrel as the forklift slammed into his machine, causing 24 carts to scatter all over the lot like so many leaves on wheels. Stacy knew she could be demoted or worse for abandoning her workstation, but most reasonable people would have considered it almost impossible for her to do anything but sprint towards the employee parking lot like her smock was ablaze to keep the forklift from crashing into her Prius and obliterating her new $500 paint job. She might as well have stayed inside like some of her lucky colleagues who never had to worry about transportation expenses more onerous than a $30 bus pass, for the forklift didn't stop until its front fender had made a nauseating imprint on her driver's side door. Her regret for leaving the self-checkouts intensified when Gerald bitterly declined to compensate her on the grounds that she should be grateful she wasn't terminated for letting a shoplifter steal $200 worth of steaks while she left her workstation unattended. While she absentmindedly stared at her screen, calculating how many hours she would have to pick up to repair her uninsured vehicle, a frantic succession of shrill rodentine squeaks resounded behind her. "You gotta be kidding me!" she groaned in exasperated disbelief as she turned around and spotted her 7-year-old daughter Beth holding a wire cage which housed her guinea pig, Pigskin. "How many times have I told you not to bring him here?" she asked. "Do you want my boss to get in trouble with the health inspector? I brought Pigskin to show and tell, but the bus driver won't let him ride with me because she says he's unsanitary," she replied, ignoring her question. "Can you wait with him in the break room for a half hour until your dad gets off work and he can take you home?" inquired Stacy, hoping the disgruntled look she was getting from 2 of her more sensitive customers had more to do with a sluggish conveyor belt than the rancid odor of Pigskin's bedding. "Dad said he had to work overtime and won't be done until 6, replied Beth. "Can you babysit Pigskin until you clock out?" Honey, I have to babysit these registers, protested her mother as diplomatically as possible. I'm already in trouble with my manager for letting someone steal while he dented my car with a forklift. I'll just set his cage down next to your cabinet, promised Beth. I'll keep him so quiet, everyone except us will think he's invisible. His stench isn't exactly invisible, thought Stacy. He can stay here until my shift ends. If you go to the pet aisle right now, get some aspen bedding and litter box deodorizer, take that cage into the ladies' room, and flush that odor down the toilet before my customers complain, she proposed. Her daughter agreed to this compromise, though the ghost of an eye roll implied she still wasn't used to changing Pigskin's bedding more than once a week, even though she'd owned him for 6 months. Stacy handed Beth a $10 bill as the child set down the rodent's enclosure to the left of her workstation and shuffled towards the pet aisle like cage cleaning was the most noxious job in Madison. Beth, are you sure that's a safe spot for... Claim! A customer with one hand on his cart and the other holding an iPhone against his oblivious ear collided with the door of Pigskin's cage, liberating it from its hinges. The rattled but uninjured guinea pig leaped from his enclosure and onto the bottom shelf of the man's cart, his terror instantly morphing into joyful gluttony as he discovered the large bag of coleslaw mix, his favorite delicacy, sandwiched between a head of romaine lettuce and a package of baby carrots, which were his second and third favorite edibles. Pigskin wasn't known for being plagued by indecision when it came to treats, so it wasn't long before Stacy discovered him simultaneously gnawing through all 3 bags as the distracted customer pushed his cart towards the paper goods aisle. Sir, there's a guinea pig eating your produce, she observed in a tactful stage whisper. However, the customer was so engrossed in a bombastic phone conversation about his fantasy baseball league that if Stacy had told him the store was being threatened by an F7 twister, he would still be loudly trying to convince his friend to erase Kyle Schwarber from his roster. She was about to reach down and extract Pigskin from the interior of the carrot bag when one of Oak Street's most impatient and affluent customers summoned her in tones twice as shrill as the guinea pig's most nerve-piercing squeak. If you don't fix this belt right now, I'm going to Target after I talk to your manager. The prospect of a customer who never spent less than $1,000 during her weekly Oak Street excursion taking that kind of money to the competition, combined with the threat of another stressful conference with Gerald that would probably be her last as a cashier, couldn't be ignored, even as the car transporting the gluttonous rodent slowly rolled out of her line of vision towards the bread aisle as Stacy sprinted over to the component in question in a show of professional remorse. After she explained with mechanical patience to the exasperated customer that the belt would work normally if it wasn't forced to transport 5 items to the bag counter at the same time, she paged her daughter. A minute later, she was racing towards the self-checkouts at a velocity Stacy wished she'd employ to catch a school bus. As soon as she saw the empty cage, with its open door barely clinging to the hinges from the impact of the cart, she sobbingly demanded, "How could you let him get loose?" Honey, a customer rammed the cart into his cage, and before I could do anything, he jumped onto the cart and started wolfing down the guy's produce, her mother explained. Where did he go? Asked Beth. He was headed for the bread aisle, answered Stacy. The customer whose veggies he was inhaling was wearing a dirty brewer's jacket and was yelling into his phone about his stupid fantasy team. Beth raced towards the aforementioned aisle like her favorite brand of fig bars was on sale and glumly returned 2 minutes later. I found the guy you mentioned, but I couldn't find Pigskin, and you'd make me eat soap if I repeated what he told me when I asked him where my guinea pig was. Asshole, muttered Stacy before picking up the register phone and announcing, Attention customers, if you have found a brown and white guinea pig in the store answering to the name of Pigskin, please bring him to the self-checkouts. Thank you. 5 seconds after this proclamation, the phone rang, causing a shudder of unbelievable optimism to pulsate through the hearts of Stacy and Beth. Unfortunately, there was nothing hopeful in the capitalistic criticism of Gerald's tone on the other end. What if the health inspector heard that announcement, or a customer heard it and told him we have a rodent problem? Do you want us to get fined and have to raise prices so high everyone in the neighborhood will take their business to Milwaukee Street Co-op? No, sir, replied Stacy as diplomatically as possible. And we don't have a rodent problem. My child's guinea pig is lost in your store. Her next words were in the most discreet stage whisper, with her lips practically kissing the receiver, so she wouldn't upset Beth or aggravate her already tense customers. If something tragic goes down because 1,000 people are stampeding through your store with full carts looking at their phones instead of their feet, that will be a PR apocalypse for this place. There was a muttered blasphemy on the other end, succeeded by, "You have 1 hour to find that rat, or I'm calling animal control." Before Stacy could explain to her boss the difference between a rat and a guinea pig, he hung up. Actually, she and her daughter had only 50 minutes to locate Pigskin, or it took 10 minutes for it to be convenient enough for Carl Whitney, who practically had to be bribed to stoop to humble cashiering duties to relieve her. At first it looked like their quest would hastily conclude in the organic banana bin until the creature that caused an 80-year-old woman to scream with such contralto intensity the produce manager's bifocals shattered turned out to be a tarantula that had been nesting in the pale green fruit since it was hoisted onto a plane in Guatemala. "Clean up in the cereal aisle," squawked the exasperated voice of Corinne Lansbury, the personnel manager, over the PA system. The source of her uncharacteristic irritation appeared to be the sound of raw Quaker oats being pulverized by her size 15s as she spoke. "Pigskin loves empty oatmeal containers," exclaimed Stacy and Beth at the same time as they bolted towards the cereal department. However, as they approached the oatmeal display, no open canisters were visible, but there was a significant heap of half-chewed oats in front of a gap where the container in which he was secreted must have stood. "There he is!" shrieked Beth as she spotted the guinea pig's shuddering body barely visible in the semi-complete darkness of the back of an oatmeal canister lying in the child's seat of a cart 6 feet in front of them. Pigskin squealed in ecstatic relief at the sound of the girl's voice and tried to leap from the container and into her arms as she bolted towards the cart, but in a disorienting mix of panic and joy, he landed on the customer's right shoulder. This gentleman was also immersed in a phone conference, but after hearing only a sentence of his side of the conversation, Stacy and Beth were discouragingly convinced their chances of retrieving the animal from the client's appendage without expensive drama would have been easier if Pigskin had been riding on the shoulder of the fantasy baseball fanatic. "You have until 4 p.m. today to remove all the dead rats from your French fryer, or I'll fine you into Chapter 11, warned the customer, who couldn't be anyone besides the city health inspector. Stacy was used to hearing him threatening various code violators on the phone. Since most of these lectures occurred at her workstation, she had actually timed their duration as one of many strategies to expedite the pace of her shifts and knew that they averaged 6 minutes. Because he had probably been on the phone for a minute before Beth discovered Pigskin atop his shoulder, Stacy had 300 seconds to power walk to the break room, snatch a baby carrot from her lunch bag, and use it to bribe the guinea pig to vacate this human vehicle that could easily drive the store into a ditch of bankruptcy. She was close enough to the employee inner sanctum to hear Supervisor Lance Meyer's off-key imitation of Celine Dion singing "My Heart Will Go On the Muzak system when a customer inquired about the location of the ATM. "I'll see," she all too hastily responded. "You'll have to take me there yourself," ordered the customer with whiny insistence that was akin to fingernails on the chalkboard of Stacy's professionalism. "I've never shopped here before." "Can you please have someone at the office show you where it is?" asked Stacy. "Sure, after I tell them about your horrible customer service skills," the customer snapped back as she indignantly proceeded towards the courtesy counter. By the time she had convinced this individual not to complain to Gerald about her, had walked with her to the ATM, and had gotten the machine to read the almost illegible chip on her credit card, she was down to only 2 minutes before the health inspector would notice his unwelcome passenger, and 15 minutes before her manager would call animal control. She prayerfully sprinted into the break room and caught up with the inspector and Pigskin in the snack aisle a minute and a half later, convinced that God had made sure that all the customers had seen was a smock-clad comet racing between the break room and the sales floor. If there was one moment in her history with Pigskin that she needed the rodent to be 100% predictable, this was the moment. Unfortunately, the guinea pig's usually voracious incisors were half an inch from the carrot when he abruptly growled, jumped off the inspector's arm, landed on the bottom shelf of the Ruffles display, and scurried behind a row of bags. Stacy's sole consolation about Pigskin's new hiding place was that he detested the taste of chips, but she still had less than a quarter of an hour to lure the guinea pig from the sour cream and onion scented darkness that he suddenly felt was just as secure as an oatmeal canister in his cage. Yet he couldn't have felt 100% satisfied with his new hideaway because he continued to growl as if some immature child was jabbing a teasing forefinger in his face, even as both Stacy and Beth tried to lure him out of the shadows of discontent with carrot sticks with escalating desperation as the minutes on their watches expired more rapidly than milk in July heat. Suddenly, Beth realized Pigskin's agitation had nothing to do with the shelf or his appetite. "It's the music, Mom!" she exclaimed. "Pigskin has never been able to eat when anything besides classical music is being played." With 5 minutes remaining before Gerald would fulfill his increasingly tangible threat, Stacy bolted to the office. It only took 30 seconds to convince Gerald to tune into Wisconsin Public Radio, but by the time the store loudspeakers were actually emitting something besides top 40 pop for the first time in 30 years, WPR's classical DJ had presumably gone home to enjoy Mozart with a pet who was probably in a much more radiant attitude than Pigskin was, as the guinea pig voiced his guttural condemnation at an All Things Considered segment about Trump's tweets. If only retrieving the stubborn rodent from a spot 7 inches from their frustrated arms was as simple as reaching behind the chip bags and seizing him by the hindquarters, but considering his profoundly ugly attitude, their chances of getting bitten and having to chase Pigskin all over the sales floor with only 3 minutes before the manager would summon animal control were demoralizing in their enormity. Suddenly, the aisles were pulsating with the staccato radiance of the first movement of Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony. Pigskin squealed in joyful relief, dove into Stacy's arms, and began to annihilate a carrot stick like it was the last edible vegetable in Madison, just as Gerald marched up to them, brandishing his iPhone as if it was a cellular sword against inefficient pet recovery. After she clocked out, she sent Beth to the car with Pigskin and went to the office. "Do you know who was playing that Mendelssohn CD when my daughter and I were trying to retrieve her guinea pig?" she asked Lance. "It was Carl," replied the supervisor. "Why would Gerald's son give a damn about me or my child's pet?" was her mystified inquiry. Lance glanced behind him to ensure that neither the manager nor his son were within earshot. "He thought Gerald was beyond unfair to you when he wouldn't reimburse you for ramming that forklift into your car, so as soon as he heard that talk show and knew that WPR wouldn't be playing classical music again for the rest of the day, he put on that Mendelssohn CD." "Where is he so I can thank him?" asked Stacy. "He's in a meeting with his dad, but I wouldn't acknowledge what Carl did in front of Gerald as long as his father is in the store," replied Lance. "Why not?" "Because Gerald wants everyone to think he put on that CD, so he can make you work late shifts for the rest of the month as payback for not calling animal control." Stacy's larynx began to form an expletive against her boss, but quickly swallowed the insult as she realized she wouldn't be able to pick up any undesirable hours that Gerald tried to impose on her if she acquired night shifts from the real origin of her gratitude. The end.